Career Exploration Day is an opportunity for young people to invite in a variety of professionals, people who are working in all sorts of different jobs and careers, so that they can learn a bit more about what kinds of opportunities are out there and connect with the world outside the school. We want to make sure that all young people can imagine the whole variety of different sorts of work experiences and careers, and if they can't see it, they can't be it. How are they going to aspire to those different opportunities if they don't know that they exist? Many of the people who go into education and start working as teachers have never worked in careers that are outside of a school. They may not know a whole lot about what it is to be working out in other fields as an architect, a lawyer, in the culinary industry. And so bringing these professionals in can really help to inform those teachers and educators about ways in which they can connect and engage with students who might want to pursue those careers. Actually, it might seem subtle, but there's a really significant difference. In the case of a traditional career day, you might just invite a bunch of folks into this school. And when I say you, the educators might really lead and drive that. What's so crucial and important is that the young people's voice, that their interests and passions are what going to drive who gets invited in. Step one is to really find ways to ask young people what their interests are. What are the problems they want to solve in the world? What do they think are the challenges? Ways to make the world a better, more equitable and just place? And who are the adults in the community that reflect those interests, passions? It could be things that they've seen as they're around town. It could be their own interests and looking for those in their local community. It could be a little bit of dreaming and imagination and trying to brainstorm.
One of the first things that we do when they first come in is we do an interest wall. Who are you as a person? What do you like to do? What do you want to be in the future? What do you imagine for yourself? Once we start getting to know who they are, then we start doing some of the other things that I'm sure schools are doing, which is to support them on resume building. What does it look like? What are some jobs that'll match what I want to do in the future?
So the first thing to do is to figure out all the different interests and passions that there are so that young people can then begin to determine who are the adults that are related to that and have jobs and careers in those fields. And so that's how you're going to develop your invite list, and the invitations will be sent out by the students, asking those adults to come in so that when the adults come in, they have a really natural reason to want to connect with the young people in the school. Once students have identified particular areas, fields, career clusters, that's when you begin to generate a list. So if students are interested in architecture, construction, engineering, figure out who are the top architecture, construction, and engineering firms in your local community. Begin to develop a list and see what you can find out about those different businesses and organizations in your community so you can begin to think of who you would want to invite. After you've identified a particular list of potential invitees, that's when you work with individual students to craft customized invitations to increase the likelihood that folks will want to come. So having students do a little bit of background research, finding out that the leader of that architecture firm has designed a particular building and that that's why they'd like to have them come in. Recognizing that a particular health clinic has moved into a part of the community where there wasn't health care in the past. These are the ways that are going to personalize and increase the likelihood that particular leaders and career professionals in the community will want to come to the event. You want to make sure that the actual day of doesn't feel rushed or thrown together too quickly. Particularly if it's your first time, there's no reason to try to schedule it 1 or 2 weeks out. Make sure you give yourself 4 to 6 weeks so that you can take care of the planning, the logistical details, thinking about where people are going to park, where they're going to arrive, who's going to greet them, where should they come, what's going to happen, are you going to have some food, which I'd highly recommend. Those little kinds of technical details turn out to be really big and important for how the day will be successful. Once you've painted a picture of what's going to happen on that day, sending out the invitations is really the next key step. Identifying which day you're going to hold the event, you'll send those invitations out to those professionals and follow up with them to confirm whether or not they're going to be able to attend. Sending out the invitations can be done in a few different ways. First, people like to get an old-fashioned paper invitation, so sending a letter that's got a hand signature on it makes it significantly more personalized. There's also a lot of folks who communicate primarily by email, so sending out it in both ways is often a good idea, including maybe a little information at the bottom that says, I'm going to call you to follow up and see if you're able to attend. That's the key next step. Then when the young person calls, they're signaling that they're the kind of people who follow up. When contacting the professionals about coming into the school, it's a great idea for the young people to suggest to them to bring in some objects or artifacts, some kind of engaging element of their work, so that they don't have to just stand and talk. We're not asking them to create a long, detailed PowerPoint presentation, but it can be really helpful to have a thing to talk about. Objects get people discussing things in really engaging ways. When young people call up these career professionals about coming into the school, it's with the explicit purpose to invite them to the event, but it's really an opportunity for them also to share a bit about themselves, why they're interested in that career, and maybe ask some questions briefly. It's sort of a mini informational interview, a way to begin to develop a bit of rapport with those folks who are coming in.
So we developed a phone script, which was just writing out on a document a casual conversation between you and the person you were calling. So it would, be your formal greeting, like, hello, how are you? My name is Elani Cabrera, and I'm a student at Odyssey STEM Academy.
And then the question was kind of like, oh, what do you do as an architect, for example? Or like, how did you get there in the first place? Like, what did you study? As well as like, just like a bunch of things that relate to like from point A to point B.
For many adolescents, this might be the first time that they've called up an adult for a professional reason, and that can be a little scary. So helping them gain the confidence is a vitally important process. This means that they might need to do some practice phone calls, and that's not particularly painful. Teenagers enjoy calling each other, so having one of them role play, being the person on the other end, or school staff or parent volunteers, it's a good way for them to practice, get over any initial anxiety, so that by the time they call the actual professional person, they feel like they've done that before.
So it was a great way to practice talking to an adult, so we were able to just get our conversation ready, ask her questions, and get a more feel before we started getting into the actual phone calls we needed to get a mentorship. You have to really want to do this. You don't want to sound like a little kid on the phone, like, oh, I don't really care about it. You have to really show that you care about it and that this is something you really want to do.
So thinking about phone etiquette is actually quite important. Encouraging them to have a warm opening greeting, to not speak too quickly, but also to not sound like you're reading from a script. Making sure that they do have a way to end and conclude with a warm, confident close. These kinds of things that might seem like little technical details, you can really practice through role playing.
I used to be the type of person that was afraid of making a call for pizza or asking an employee where a certain food was. But now that changed with learning how to do interviews, because I'm better than that. That's just normal socializing. Once you learn these skills of communicating, you can always use this in your daily life. It was just a lot of practice and also building your self-confidence.
When young people are making phone calls to these professionals, it may be the first time that they're getting on for a scary, risky call with an adult who might say no to them. We often say, you might only get 1 in 10 adults who are willing to say yes. In reality, it's usually quite a bit higher than that. But that way, when the first adult says, no, I'm sorry, well, there's no way of knowing how busy they are, what else is going on in their life. It's very important to prepare them for that and to actually set their expectations at a reasonable place. This makes sure that the young person doesn't feel all depressed, despondent, feels like, oh, I didn't do it well. Usually they'll hit at least 2 or 3 out of 10, and they're gonna feel great about the progress they've made. Even though they've confirmed by phone, it's a good idea to then send a reminder a week in advance to just double confirm and make sure that folks know that they're coming. That can be done by email or by phone.
Building up an elevator speech, so talking about yourself. Who are you? What are your accomplishments? If you could define yourself into 3 words, what would they be?
First of all, they trained us a bunch.
They prepare you with things like elevator speeches, which you're 10 seconds, here, talk to them what you want to talk about, introduce yourself. But I still was oh, I'm gonna forget my lines, I'm gonna forget what I need to say. And it was just nerve-wracking because it was a new experience.
I had to be confident, and I was confident because I had trained for this for a month. I had to repeat my elevator speech 10 times a day for me to learn it.
Having them work with each other, interview each other. They're able to feel confident when they're able to speak to one another. And we have them videotape each other. They are super uncomfortable in the beginning, and as they practice, it starts getting easier and easier for them to stand in front of an audience and to talk to other people.
There are a variety of different ways to structure the time on a career exploration day, but in general, you'd want to include some of the following elements. An introduction at the beginning to make sure that all of the young people and adults have a sense of what's going to happen over the course of the day. It's nice to highlight a couple of the adults in particular to address the whole group briefly, just to share. Sometimes there might be someone who works with dog training, and it's going to be a little bit of spectacle to get everybody excited. Then breaking people out into small groups is really key. You want to create a situation where it doesn't feel like a presentation, but that the young people get to sit down in a small, intimate group, maybe 2 to 4 young people with each adult, and get to have a 5 to 10, maybe 15-minute conversation with that person. We actually encourage it to feel a little more like speed dating. Then have those young people rotate around so that over the course of an hour and a half, they might get to meet 6 or 8 different adults in the community. And then I think a conclusion that has a little bit of celebration and some food, an opportunity for a little bit more mingling. Certainly not an actual cocktail hour, but if it has a little bit of that feel and vibe, you're acculturating young people to the idea of networking in that kind of environment. If possible, these are great events to happen during the school day. Part of it is you're inviting working professionals. That's during their working professional day. So you're not asking them to go outside, beyond, and cut into family or personal time. It's really important to think about the space where you're going to hold these events. Trying to cram a couple hundred people into a loud cafeteria space, it's going to be challenging for people to hear each other. It can be difficult to have the kinds of intimate, close connection and conversation that you want. So thinking about the spaces that you have in your school where kids can break out into small groups, but still feel like they're part of a large collective is important. From a student perspective, on a career exploration day, they're going to arrive and have a chance first to be introduced to the whole group, and then to break into small groups and meet with one professional. Now, they're probably not going to connect necessarily with the first one, but by the time they've been through 3, 4, 5 different adults that they get to talk to, there's a pretty good chance that at least 1 or 2 of those, they'll forge some kind of interest or connection or relationship or bond where they want to learn more. And that's really the goal. For a couple of hits over the course of an hour and a half, if that is achieved in just one day, that can be some really transformative opportunities for young people.
So I talked to a therapist, I asked her some questions, I asked her about her job, what she liked to do. Some of it I couldn't ask because it was classified, but I still got a lot of info. And at the end I kind of thought, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And so I was like, I'll look for something else. So it's really helpful when you're trying to learn about a job that you think you're interested in, even though you might not be interested in it later on.
From a teacher's perspective, what you're looking out for is to make sure first that the young people are prepared to get in to the career exploration day, and then second, you want to make sure that conversations stay a little bit lively. So floating from group to group to make sure that there's a bit of engagement and interaction, you're going to want to rotate that every 10 to 15 minutes, maybe overhearing or asking a right question that can prompt a bit more, or if you know that there's a student who's a little more quiet and reserved, saying, I know that she's interested in this. Could you say a little bit more about that? Now, the best thing that could happen is that the student feels like they didn't quite get to finish the conversation. That actually means they're going to want to follow up and be hungry for more. Two to 3 hours is really a comfortable amount of time to be able to welcome people, provide a bit of an informal introduction, let them engage a bunch with students, and then debrief a little bit after with the group of adults. We usually recommend that students conclude a little bit before the adults. Many adults are not necessarily used to talking to that many adolescents so rapidly, so allowing the students to leave first, bringing the adults back together, gathering a few reflections. What were some highlights for the day? This is a way that they can reinforce to each other that they had a good positive experience, and that's a time when you can figure out which adults might be most open to hosting a student, either for an additional experience, maybe even a shadow day out at their place of work. Once students return back either to their class or to meet with their teacher or advisor, that's a great time to ask them to reflect on what were the highlights for you? What's something you learned that was surprising? What might you want to learn more about? How do you think we should follow up? Following up from Career Professionals Day is probably the most important step. Making sure that young people have a chance to write a little thank you note, create some little memento or artifact, send off a little certificate of appreciation. This is a way that those adult professionals in the community will recognize that their time was honored and valued, make them want to come back and do it again in the future, and also be open to having opportunities for young people to come out and either volunteer or even intern with them. If you're a teacher who's doing this for the first time, rather than trying to go too big too fast, you might want to start with just a few students, or at most one section of one class. Don't try to create something with 200 or 300 folks coming in at the same time. 10 or 20 can be a really powerful experience for a group of students. The place that I've seen Career Exploration Day go a little off the rails is when the expectations aren't made clear up front. So you want to make sure that from the very beginning of the invitation, you're clear on the start time, on the end time, and when people arrive, you take them through a little bit of what's going to happen over the course of the day, and then follow that agenda. That's important not only for the adult professionals, but also for the young people as well. It's so important that schools show young people the world that's outside, beyond the walls of the classroom, beyond the grounds of the school. That's where all of the really interesting work in the community is happening. How can young people aspire to those kinds of jobs and careers if they've never seen it? This is a way to bring the outside in and prepare young people to go out into the world.